Patrick Klepek, let's talk about The Gentleman on Netflix. Here is the premise of the first episode. When the Duke of Halstead dies, his second son inherits everything, including the title, house, and grounds, plus a whole heap of trouble, end quote. Patrick Klepek, in one sentence or less, do you think people should watch The Gentleman?
Yes, I was tickled by this show. I know more of Guy Ritchie through cultural osmosis than actively keeping up with his career. And so maybe more of his creative ticks work on me because I've been less exposed to them over the course of his filmography. But I had a great time with the first couple episodes and am anxious to see how the rest plays out.
I also really enjoyed this. If you like Guy Ritchie's British gangster movies, I think you're going to like this show as well. I kind of often measure how much I like a show like this by how eager I am to get back to it after you and I talk about it on this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And I found myself feeling very constrained by the fact that we only talk about the first two episodes. Right? We want to just
Mm-hmm.
talk about the beginning and the end. I can't wait to get back. Like I'm like I wanted to watch more episodes before we started recording today. And so that gives you an indication of how much I enjoyed it. So it sounds like for Patrick and I, this one is a hit. So check it out on Netflix. Patrick Klepek, let's now talk about and spoil the plot of the first two episodes of The Gentleman. All 8 episodes are live. Patrick and I have seen the first two. The first two episodes revolve around Eddie Horniman, who is minding his own business as a UN peacekeeper when all of a sudden he's called back home. Let's pause here for a second. I just love that they chose kind of like one of the most noble professions, I guess you could have, arguably, depending on what your thoughts are on UN peacekeepers. But it's kind of like this is kind of like a bleeding heart for the world, basically.
Well, and even how he's portrayed in
Yes,
that brief moment is like, hey, we've got our rules, but like there's a sequence where their papers were expired, and he's like, they're 3 days expired. Just tell him to get them fixed before he comes across the border again. And it's
he's an understanding, kind chap.
Yeah.
He's a nice dude. It's almost like they're like, okay, head of a London crime family syndicate ish thing. What is the most opposite profession we can have of that? And I guess they settled on UN peacekeeper, right?
Well, and also, I think interestingly, before we know, I knew very little about this show ahead of time. So this maybe more of this came as a surprise to me as the show went along. But we don't even know he's rich, right? Like nothing about somebody who's doing this job as it's portrayed. It suggests like it's probably a good job. It probably like lets you pay your bills,
right?
But nothing that is extravagant or lavish, and
that he's like royalty or he has titles or whatever. You would not suspect that, right?
So I think it does a pretty good job of establishing the moral center of a character in a very brief amount of time. I mean, this sequence lasts minutes before we then realize that like, oh, you're about to be whisked away into riches. But it's I thought that was very effective at setting up an interesting arc for a character that we know. If you're watching a show like this, like we know where this is headed. Like none of that's going to be a surprise.
Eddie is shocked to learn that he is the new Duke of Halstead after the passing of his father and has inherited his entire estate. Unfortunately, his brother Freddie thinks the throne belongs to him, and also Freddie's just generally not very bright and has already gotten himself into a lot of trouble. He owes $8 million to this other crime family, and they are coming to collect very soon. Freddie meets Susie Glass, who helps her father, Bobby, run a massive weed-dealing operation right out of Eddie's estate, which, by the way, is an estate that's of great interest to Stanley Johnston with a T, played by Giancarlo Esposito, who wants to buy it and potentially move into the meth dealing business. The first 2 episodes focus on Eddie's attempt to pay off Freddie's debt to Tommy, but things go horribly awry when Freddie ends up murdering Tommy while he's in a chicken suit. So that's basically the plot of the first couple episodes, is how they get out of this situation. And let's start with this. Like many of Guy Ritchie's movies, these episodes create a whole world of colorful characters and a tone that's irreverent, but also occasionally grotesquely violent. How did the tone of the show work for you, Patrick Klepek?
I thought that worked. I thought it worked really, really well. I think a lot of that is owed to Kaya Scodelario, who plays Susie Glass. I think she is the heart of this show. Like her performance is captivating, and like I think she represents like some of the best ways this show oscillates between not quite deadly serious, but like deeply funny, and also it's just I think her performance is magnetic, and is like she's the kind of performance where every time she's not on screen, I'm wondering, I think she should be on screen again. Is
Well, she
frankly
kind
what
of
I'm thinking.
exudes this hyper competence, I would say.
Yes,
That
yes.
I don't know that I would say she's the heart of the show, but I love her performance in the show, and she is extremely compelling. But she's kind of like, this is a person who's extremely familiar with the world, who understands all the rules, and who's going to like keep things moving along.
Hmm.
Uh, uh, but I think we're really meant to empathize with Theo James, who plays
Yeah.
Eddie. And I don't know that I find that character particularly interesting at this point in time. You know, like
No, he felt he felt. I guess that's part of the reason why I'm so drawn to
right.
the Susie Glass character is because he's like he's fine. You know what I mean? Like he's fine. He's fine.
He certainly looks the part. Very, very
He
handsome
looks
fellow,
the
right?
part, and I don't know if it's the writing. I can't tell if it's the acting, but there's something. It all doesn't come together. I guess I don't really buy it. Is part of what I'm having trouble
Wow.
with. Like
Yeah.
I like the world. I like the characters. I like how they're meshing together as a whole. But the one worry I have about the show going forward is if so much ends up hinging on him, and that's going to be a problem for me because I he's fine for me as a cog in the broader machine that is the show and its storytelling, but I don't know. There's just something about that character, that performance that I don't know. I have trouble fully buying. Maybe it's because he's like almost less cartoonish than everything else around him. Like as much as Susie Glass is kind of like this the straight character who is like the kind of like in some ways like an audience guide to like what's happening in the world. What are the rules? Like who are the players? Everything around him is so exaggerated and he is so straight, like I'm the
grounded,
cool, I'm
right?
cool as a cucumber, but then occasionally I kill a guy, sort of thing. And I guess maybe that actually, as he loosens up as it goes along, and probably embraces being, a member of a criminal enterprise, and probably kills a lot more people along the way. Maybe that will blossom into something. But there's something about the kind of blandness of the character.
Yeah,
I think purposely as written. I don't really. It's why I have trouble putting it on the performance. I think this is the character as it's on the page. I have trouble buying that, and I'm hoping it'll be more dynamic and interesting as the show goes along.
I agree. I think he makes the transition really quickly from UN peacekeeper to I'm the new Duke of Halstead, and there's no, I don't need a show that's full of him being like, wow, I can't believe our family's doing all these horrible things. That's unbelievable. Like, I don't need like a show full of that, but I want kind of a teensy tiny bit of that to show like, hey, maybe this role doesn't fit completely like a glove because that would be boring, which it kind of is a little bit. You know,
he's a little too calm and
right.
like it
he's
makes
like witnessing all this wild stuff happening, and he's just like, "Oh, that's cool. I understand all this." And it's like he's pulling off that character well, if that's what the character's supposed to be, but that's not a particularly interesting character. It's just like, oh, a person who's completely in control of everything. Okay, great, I guess.
Right, and that makes sense for like the Susie Glass character because this is someone who's seen all this shit before.
Yes,
and like, okay, we got to get rid of a body. Here's how we get rid of a body. And so I don't need him to be losing it because his brother is already kind of playing like kind of a wild card character. But I do miss a little bit of the. I need like an arc. I need you to be like a little weirded out. Like as there's just something a little bit more to the transition because it seems like we've just immediately gone to, well, this is a complicated situation, but I have some ideas on how to solve it. It's like, you do? Why? Why do you have ideas on how to solve it? It just seems like we jump to that what is it, Arrested Development, the jump to conclusions, Matt? Like I feel like he's jumped ahead a couple character arcs in the show in a way
Office
that
Space.
Office Space, yes.
One of the things that is kind of one of Guy Ritchie's ticks that I mostly appreciate is
okay.
he likes playing around with time a lot. He will often have a character say something and then he'll cut to the moment in time when that was relevant, back in like 3 hours ago or an episode ago or whatever. And I do think we get a lot of that in the first couple episodes. For instance, the end of the first episode is in my opinion, a great sequence where you feel this thing escalating. Something terrible is about to happen, And then what ends up happening is Freddy ends up killing the person he owes a debt to, Tommy Dixon, who, by the way, his
Mhm.
brother, Tommy Dixon's brother, is John Dixon. John the Gospel Dixon, which I love John the Gospel Dixon's intro of he's reading Bible verses while he's suffocating people to death. It's just like so delightfully over the top and kind of very classic Guy Ritchie. But yeah, then in episode 2, they replay that entire sequence back from the perspective of another character, which I just really thought was like a cool way
Mhm.
of recapping what had happened, but in a really interesting, with a different filmmaking style. Anyway, so uh, I kind of appreciate Guy Ritchie's stylistic touches in these first couple of episodes. The other thing I want to mention is just Dar Salim is an actor that plays a character named Felix, whose job it is to clean up dead bodies, and also he has strong opinions about how you should handle these situations, like no witnesses and so on and so forth. Dar Salim, awesome actor. He was
Mhm.
in Guy Ritchie's movie called The Covenant, which very few people saw,
Hmm.
but he was amazing in that movie too, and I really enjoyed that film. But I thought he was wonderful in this show, and also he puts a great button on the second episode, right? The whole
Oh, yeah.
time, Eddie Horniman is trying to prevent this kid, Jethro, from getting killed because Jethro has witnessed something horrible happening, which is Tommy Dixon, Tommy Dixon's dead body on the estate. And so Eddie spends all this time dedicated to trying to save Jethro's life. And then there's this wonderful moment when Eddie's talking with Susie while they're sending Jethro off. He's like, you know what? I think we're not going to see him again. And Susie's like, you know what? I have a feeling you're right about that. And I was like, wow, that's an odd thing for Susie to say. Why would she say that? That's weird. That's very un-Susie like.
Mhm.
And then later you find out it's because she has engineered Jethro's death
Mhm.
at the hands of Felix right at the end.
Poor
And
kid.
yeah, wonderful moment and kind of this sign that hey, Eddie is in a world that he's not really he doesn't really understand yet.
Yeah.
That was a cool moment of that. Yeah. But any thoughts on Dar Salim playing Felix or any of the characters that aren't Susie Glass in the show?
No, he's especially great because the, the introduction we get to him is so great because they call him to come clean up a mess and he's clearly just blasted at the bar.
Yeah,
At it seems early in the it's before lunch. I guess the sense that I'm getting and like him sleeping off, being drunk in the car, and then being upset. There's a small kicker of a joke there where he doing the common thing that doesn't work as well as it's portrayed in the movies, which is like, I'm drunk, I'll just have some coffee and that'll fix me right up. Get an upper with a downer. That's not quite how body chemistry works necessarily. But he asks for a coffee, falls asleep in this car, shows up to take care of a body, wakes up, feels refreshed, and he's like, give me my coffee. It's cold. It's like, yeah, because you were asleep for the last hour and change or whatever as you got out to this estate. Just a really wonderful performance that we get just kind of bits of in the first two episodes, and I'm hoping that'll be
yes.
an expanded role. As I feel it would be a waste to just have him be a bit player, and I'm hoping that there'll be more of him. But I mean, I think it speaks
It's just
to
fun. It's just funny to have someone put together the ingredients for disposing of bodies while completely out of it. Because almost all the time in those movies like John Wick or Pulp Fiction, the
Mhm,
people that come to clean up the bodies are hyper competent.
mhm,
And then you kind of realize, oh, like if your job is just to clean up bodies, maybe you're kind of like the B team. Like
mhm.
maybe in the hierarchy of the criminal underworld, you're not actually doing that well because you're if you were doing better, you wouldn't just be cleaning up the bodies, So maybe his life is not going exactly as he'd like. I like that idea, and it was brought to life wonderfully in the show.
I don't mind Freddy, but the one pause I have about where the rest of the show might go is I think it would get very tiring if the entire dynamic of the show then becomes Eddie cleaning up Freddy making another stupid decision.
Yeah, I was
Because
already annoyed by the end of episode 1, that we're dedicating this amount of resources to it, right?
there's like nothing redeeming about Freddy. Like we are not
Right.
given
Yeah.
a lot of insight into they don't seem to be particularly close brothers, other than the fact that family is blood and that like you might be close, like, but there's nothing about this family that like screams they love to get together in the summer and are really close and like having a great time. They're getting together to hear about the finances of their father passing and the estate distribution, because that's what that's more of their tie together than seemingly anything else. And so that it's like I can deal with this for 2 episodes, the extent of like watching a film, but
Right.
I don't know that I can suffer through multiple arcs of Eddie cleaning it up with Susie, and then Freddie goofs it all up again because he did a little bit of coke. And so hopefully that's not where this
Yeah.
goes, because I think that that would work for a 2-episode arc, kind of like a film. But for 8 episodes or however long this is, I'm gonna need more. I don't even need Freddie to become a like really dynamic character. I just hope that like that way of setting up conflict is not the show's central source of tension. Now, they've already introduced sort of a broader villain, and so I have to assume that will end up being more of a, like what creates conflict going forward. But
You're talking about Bobby Glass, who is
yes,
Susie Glass's father, right? Yeah.
yes. Yeah, basically everything dealing with the like sort of who is going to end up owning this estate and this drug business. But yeah, I'm hoping the Freddie Eddie thing is either done for, or they establish a new dynamic between the two of them. I'd be more interested in watching the two of them work together, and those personality types being so
Right.
different coming into conflict, but not because Freddie's just a fuck up that can't,
Yeah.
control himself for 5 minutes.
100% agreed. Uh, do want to mention Giancarlo Esposito plays Stanley Johnston, who's this billionaire who's interested in the estate. Who knows how that's going to play out? But I have a feeling he's not going to be so patient later on in the show. I'm just guessing. I don't know anything. Stanley Johnson is basically Gus Fring if he never met Walter White. That's kind of what that character is, right?
I'm summarizing a much pithier like social media post, but it was something along the lines of like a screenshot from the show with him in it. It's like, is there ever been a better sign that some characters have fucked up than the presence of this guy in a show across the table from you? Which
Yeah.
is just the kind of like, it's unfortunate that I think he's a more talented, actor than how he's sort of been typecast post
Mm-hmm.
Breaking Bad into sort of this, supervillain that he now has across Star Wars, across here. But he's good at it. He's good at menace.
Indeed. And I just want to give a shout out to Guy Ritchie for hinging this entire plot on smartphone predictive text. I love this idea. The episode is titled "Tackle Tommy Woo Woo," and it's like, why is this message here? Why did you write this? It's so cryptic and weird. And it's like the character Jethro says, "I guess it was predictive text. That was the problem."
Well, I mean, here's what I'll
who
say.
Who among us has not had a predictive text snafu? That's
Exactly,
wonderful.
100%. But I was listening to an episode of your podcast, the Filmcast, as you were discussing. I forget what film it was, but essentially like how movies increasingly might have to set themselves as period pieces in like the 80s or
Right.
90s in order to avoid the way that cell phones destroy a lot of traditional plot devices for different films. And I thought, I don't know that you can mine everything out of predictive text going awry, but I did think that was hints at like different ways you can approach the cell phone problem in films in a way that maybe suggests there are ways to get out of that and still set things in modern times, and you just have to be a little more creative about what can go wrong with a cell phone based on what it's good and isn't good at. So I thought that was a really neat solution to the problem.
Agreed. Smartphones can go wrong all the time. Curb Your Enthusiasm. There is a whole 5-minute scene of Larry David screaming at Siri this season. So definitely you can use cell phones to create tension as well. They don't only need to diffuse it. All right. Overall, Patrick Klepek, I think we like the show. It's fun. It's not necessarily super serious. Like it's not going to be a treatise on the London underworld and class disparity or anything like that. It's just like kind of have a blast watching bad people do bad things to each other. That's what it is. So
it's a good time. It is a definition of a good time show that goes down easy, and that's okay sometimes.
Hey everyone, David Chen here. Thank you so much for watching that video from Decoding TV. If you want to get an audio version of the show, all you got to do is go to podcast.decodingtv.com. And if you want to support what we do, get ad-free episodes of the podcast and also bonus episodes of the podcast, go to decodingtv.com and become a paid member. Of course, you can also like and subscribe for more. We appreciate it. Thanks. See you later.